Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse.
And my name is Jake.
And I'm Adam, and I'm lactose intolerant.
Aw, poor guy. And this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
All right. So in the studio today, we have Jacob Martin, good friend of ours, me and Adam's from our local gaming group. We've known him for years and years and years. So welcome to the podcast, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Adam's joined us back in the studio today. We somehow managed to sync our schedules up. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's been busy with the new job and everything.
Yeah,
So
same thing for me.
Yeah.
So we're all coming together today to talk about our second New Master preview battle report. In this one, I played Brewmaster against Jacob, who brought Kirai, Envoy of the Court. I believe that this version of Kirai was the second Master Tease that we saw. She comes out of the yet to be released The Other Side starter box, along with the new Sonya and their associated support models. We know one of those models is called the Guisin. We're going to link some pictures of it in the show notes just because it got teased a little while ago. We don't know the rules. All we know is that there are 3 models, so we can pretty safely assume that they're minions, which would kind of make sense for the starter box. But based on that card art, I'm pretty excited about these things. They're pretty gory. I love the looks of them.
It's just about everything I love about like that Korean horror motif.
Yeah, they're pretty gruesome.
Just creepy and unnatural. Yeah.
Remind you of like The Ring or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So just as a quick little aside, Jake and a couple of his friends actually have their own podcast, which I wanted to give him a quick second to plug. So it's an actual play RPG podcast called Nastygram, which we'll include some links to in the show notes as well. But Jake, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here, but you want to tell us just a quick 5-second blurb about your show?
Sure. Yeah. It's an actual play podcast. We do multiple different role-playing game systems. Our kind of flagship game was a D&D game. By the time you're listening to this, the whole thing's going to be available, all 18 episodes. So, you can binge that while you paint your new Malifaux masters. And after that, we're going to be doing a Dungeon World campaign. So it's always going to be something fresh and new.
Yeah, I've been following the original campaign, the D&D campaign, on a weekly basis, and I'm not just saying this because Jake's my friend, but it's one of those few podcasts that I don't just kind of wait until it shows up on my podcast feed. Like, I make a point every week of keeping an eye out for the releases, and they've been my workout buddies for several weeks at this point. So thanks to those guys for quite a few hours of entertainment. So as usual, my next question would be, what are you guys drinking tonight? So Adam, did you manage to squirrel up a drink this time?
Adam is currently on call. So
Adam's on call.
Adam tends to be on call more often than not now. So Adam is drinking himself a nice Arnold Palmer while we sit here and talk about things.
Arnold Palmer doesn't sound too bad. How about you, Jake?
I'm drinking a Dogfish Head 90-minute Imperial IPA.
Dogfish Head 90 is great. That was actually one of the first craft beers that I ever really, truly enjoyed shortly after I moved to Michigan. For whatever reason, me and Jenna decided that we were going to grab a couple of beers at the local liquor store, and the packaging looked real fancy, and it was one of the only things in a 4-pack. So I figured it probably had to be pretty good. And I'll tell you what, man, that beer, it sent me down a rabbit hole. And is largely responsible for where I find myself today.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are you drinking?
I have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, good classic beer. One of the kind of cool things about this one is, people see Sierra Nevada in the liquor store all the time, but this particular beer got released in it was like 1979 or 1980. It's been around for a long time, and it was one of the couple of beers that was largely responsible for the American craft beer revolution. When it came out, I might even say on the bottle, yeah, came out in 1980. It was vastly different than pretty much everything else that was on the American beer marketplace. Way different than all the macro breweries, like your Bud Miller Coors type stuff. Way hoppier, way more flavorful, and the Sierra Nevada brewery can largely be credited with the growth of the American craft beer industry. So, cheers to Sierra Nevada. And there's your little bit of beer trivia for the week, guys.
I gotta say, I do love the beer trivia portion of your program.
Good. Sometimes I wonder if it's a little hacky.
I have shared your how to pour a nitro with many people.
Yeah. Speaking of nitro, so a little bit of background for Jake. Jake and his wife own a wonderful little cafe in a town nearby me, and I actually had this is not something that they have at the cafe, but I tried some somewhere else, and I was amazed at how freaking good it was. And it was a nitro coffee with lemon in it. Oh my god!
Oh, that's weird.
It was amazing. Apparently, it's like something that people do in like Spain and Italy and all that. And
yep, it's funny that you should say that because I have had foreigners ask for lemon in their coffee.
Yeah, so it's kind of amazing. It had just like a little bit of sweetness and the nitro smoothness, and then that little bit of lemon, and wow.
You know what, though? If you think about it, I mean, they've been selling those chocolate oranges for years, and it's kind of like the same. It really is kind of the same thing. I mean, it's got a little bit of that cocoa taste with a little bit of the citrus taste. It kind of just goes together. I had a coffee with turmeric in it today, and it blew my mind.
Did it stain your teeth orange?
I don't know. I didn't look at them, to be honest with you. But yeah, it was like turmeric, and it had like agave in it, and I was like, this is going to be awful, and it was delicious.
It sounds pretty damn good.
They call it golden milk, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It was fantastic, though.
Cool. So what's going to happen every week is every time we record is the beer and other section is going to get longer and longer. And then at a certain point, it's going to be a beer and other podcast instead of a Malifaux podcast.
Just put a thing in the show notes, like skip to 18 minutes, 40 seconds if you don't want to hear about that.
All right. So Malifaux content time. So the first thing that we're going to do, just like we did with the Asami episode, is we're going to just do an overview top to bottom of the card. Just to refresh everybody's memory. Like I said, it's been quite a while since Kirai was teased. We're recording on August 3rd right now. So our most recent tease that we saw was the Victorias, Yan Lo, and Kenshiro, the tactician, I believe is his name. Their shared enforcer. So we're probably going to be seeing quite a few of these new master teases. We are still going to continue to release battle reports for teased masters, as often as we can. I have another game under the belt already that I'm hoping to record for sometime this week, and that was a Dreamer Insomniac versus Zip game with another mutual friend of ours. So look forward to that one in the very near future as well. We'll probably continue this content right through probably when they release the bulk of the Masters at Gen Con or all the Masters or whenever they're going to be doing it. One thing that before we get into the rest of the episode that I wanted to touch on was, how do you guys think they're going to actually go about releasing these models? I have a theory, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think too.
I have no idea. I would imagine individually. I don't know.
It's possible.
I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, if I had to guess just by what's been released already, a lot of them are going to be like remasters of the Avatar models. Just because like Victoria is clearly very similar to the old Avatar model, right? So I think if they had an Avatar, chances are the new title is going to be linked to that avatar model, and the ones that didn't will get something new.
So we saw with Yanlo and Vix that they share an enforcer who has both keywords. So I think from a business perspective, what would make a lot of sense for them to do is to release a box set that is Yanlo, Vix, and that enforcer, assuming that all of the masters share an enforcer with another master, because then people get two models that they want, and now they have an extra master from another faction, and that might spur them into saying, "Hey, maybe I'll try 10 Thunders," or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's where I landed as well. I'm pretty confident that that's how they're going to do it for exactly the reasons that you just articulated. I don't think that they'd release everything individually. That was a big focus for them going into 3E, was making sure that they got kind of their SKU bloat in line. They had way too many boxes, and it made it difficult for retailers to stock the product. I've heard some people say that they think they might release like a box with all of the masters for a faction. I suppose that's possible, but then that doesn't address the enforcers or the support models. You'd end up having to have, a individual box for every single one of those. So yeah, I think that we're probably going to see two masters and their shared support model or models in the case of Anya and Ironsides. So
do we think they're gonna release another card pack per faction?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Just kind of to update the things that are new, because obviously every faction's getting, you would imagine, a new master for each master, a new title for each master, so a new card for each master, and then anything else that gets attached.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible.
That'd be nice, actually, because I haven't updated my cards in a few erratas, so things just, you end up with so many cards that are out of date. It'd be nice to just have a new set.
I wouldn't be surprised if what they end up doing, I don't know that they would release like a card box with all of the cards for a faction plus all the new stuff, just because you'd end up with a lot. I mean, certainly not everybody. Jake, you're a good example, but there'd be a lot of people that would end up getting a bunch of cards that they didn't need just so they could get the 15 cards that they do need.
Yeah, I'm thinking more along the lines like so in 2E whenever they released books or expansions, you would get something like that. I'm wondering if this is a new expansion, new book, that they're going to release the cards for the book in a pack, and you get all of them, whatever, because it's only going to be
that. I think is likely.
Yes, and then you get all of them for other masters, and it's fine because whatever faction you play, it's bought in that one box. So
right. And it's going to be a while before all of the models get released. I mean, I would imagine they're going to space out the releases, because it's not like, last year with Explorers, they're still working on Explorers releases and will be working on them for quite some time. I mean, the majority of the faction at this point, I think, is still not released. So they're not just going to drop a bunch of models for all these new masters and support pieces, and then suddenly have nothing on the release schedule for the next year. So it's going to get spaced out, and I think giving people the option of getting the new cards on the front end so that they can figure out their proxies and their counts as and all that makes the most sense.
Yeah, so that's where I have a problem, is if this is going to be a new game mechanic, a new thing that everybody has the ability to do, I think those options need to be made available to everybody right away.
Yeah,
because you can't. I can't go into a game. Let's say I'm just picking ones. Let's pick ones they already teased. Like, let's say they release Vix and they release Kirai early, right? Well, now only the Vix and Kirai have the option of playing titles because everybody else is waiting for their models.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to come up with some sort of official ruling for that. I mean, it's no different than, well, it is somewhat different than with Explorer Society. I mean, obviously, Vassal's a thing, but in terms of live play, I mean, I really haven't played against anybody live that's been using Explorer Society stuff that doesn't actually have released models yet.
And exactly, and not only that, it's not even like it's not even the situation where with all of them you can say, well, just use the old master and then use the new card, because some of them, in the case of the Vex, it's a totally different base size.
Yeah, the base size thing is the real tricky bit. Yeah. So they'll have to come up with some sort of official wording for gaining grounds to address that, because I think you're right. If it just kind of tapers out over time, I think that's probably going to be kind of unhealthy for the game and lead to a lot of frustrated players that want to use their new stuff in tournaments and can't.
Yeah, and we see a new base size with Von Stuck as well,
Mm-hmm.
and which leads me to believe, maybe they might be trying to make as many of these as possible different enough so that you have to buy it, or at least you want to buy it.
Right. And exactly. And I think they do a great job of making beautiful models, and folks are really passionate about the hobby side of things as well. But to your point, like you don't want your big releases to just be stuff that people can say, "Oh, cool. Well, I mean, I can buy the new model, but I don't have to, so I'm not going to."
Yeah, and that's where the whole Avatar thing was coming in. Like, honestly, I played a game with the leaked Vix the other day, and I simply used the Vix Avatar because that's essentially what it was. It was just 2 Vix on the base, So.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So let's get to talking about Kirai. So I'll just read through the card. We'll do a couple of comments on each ability as they as we get through. And then after we do the model breakdown, we'll talk about the actual game itself. So Kirai herself, she's got a pretty typical stat line. I think she's normal. She's 12 wounds, so nothing out of the ordinary there. Her front of card abilities are number 1, Anchor to Reality. When a friendly Urami model within an 8-inch aura would heal, this model may have one Urami model within 8 inches heal that amount instead. So very similar to what we see from Cadmus.
Yeah, that didn't come up a whole lot in our game, but it is a really good ability. Mainly because a lot of the stuff in Urami has built-in heals, and a lot of times it's heal yourself only. But with Anchor Reality, like a lot of things have Feast of Vengeance, and that can now get put on anyone. Or one model that you're going to see a lot of is the Gaki, who has a couple different ways to heal himself, and now those heals can heal anyone.
Yeah, and the way that we played it in our game, and I'm fairly certain that this was the correct way to do so, was that if a model's already at full health, then you can't use this ability to then pass that heal on to something else. So that's the ruling for Cadmus, and I believe that holds true with this one. But maybe somebody can correct us on that.
Yeah. Because otherwise, Grave Spirit's Touch, the upgrade, which gives you regen 2, becomes amazing. Because now it's regen anyone 2.
Yeah, it's a good point. So her next ability is Ghostly Presence. This one's huge. Friendly Urami models within an 8-inch aura, so that includes Kirai, of course. All of her front of card auras include her, incidentally. Friendly Urami models within an 8-inch aura may treat crow cards as having any suit in addition to crows. And that is incredible.
It is. I mean, how many times did it come up in our game?
Oh my god. Like 5+ times a turn at least.
It's one of those abilities where you might read it and at first go, oh, okay, that's cool, and then move on. But when you see it in play, you're like, oh, this makes all of my triggers twice as likely to go off. That's amazing.
And Urami have some pretty incredible triggers. Yeah. So kind of I would say her most defining ability is the next one we've got here, which is Join Us. So after any action in which an enemy model is moved through by a friendly Urami model, if the enemy model has not failed a duel from Join Us this turn, it must pass a TN 13 willpower duel, or this model may summon a Urami minion cost 4 or less in base contact with it. If the summon model does not have Mindless, it gains slow.
So you're only summoning Gaki or Seishin, and let's hope that this new Guisin model is 4 points or less. And yeah, Gaki and Seishin are not amazing at all, but this can really snowball.
Yeah. And the other thing that I was going to point out was, because there's a couple of things about this that make it super, super, super efficient. So, like, you're probably not going to summon Sation with this because there's no real reason to unless you've already maxed out on Gaki, or if you like really need some like card draw or something. I mean, there might be some corner case situations where you take a Sation, but most of the time you're taking a Gaki. This doesn't require your master to spend any AP or resources. So it's extremely resource efficient in that it doesn't require any resources at all, aside from AP from other models most of the time. You don't even need to use a master AP to summon. It just kind of happens. So, like, with all your incorporeal stuff, and this is how the majority of the summons happened in our game, was Jake would just charge one of his models through one of mine. I'd have to take a test, and usually it was towards the end of the turn. I'm out of cards in my hand, and that TN13 seems like you're going to fail it. It seems like you fail it pretty often as soon as you have no cards left in your hand, even on stuff that you only need like a 5 or a 6 to pass the duel with. So the other thing is that it summons stuff into base contact with you, which for anybody that's listened to me prattle on about English Ivan, summoning a model in base contact with an enemy is such a ball breaker. Like, it immediately locks them down. You're in position with that model to start attacking right away. It's just gross. And the fact that she can do it without actually having to spend anything is
and on
incredible.
top of that, Jesse, there's no range. It's not an aura. It's not even line of sight. It's just an effect for the game. So yeah, like you said, it's something that just kind of will happen as you're playing. And that's the way you really take advantage of it, is by just making it be an extra thing.
You know what's even more dangerous, I think, with this is one. You're right. This is more of like a. It's not really like something. It's not something as far as. I guess you even tactically can do it, but it's more of like an environmental hazard in the game. It's just something that's going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with it, and you need to know that. And it's like trying to avoid it is going to be near impossible. But what's really dangerous about this is a lot of times with summoners, there's some kind of cap. So you can summon once, and you can summon like maybe the most I've seen is 3 models. If they're particularly weenie models, maybe 4, whatever it is. In this, there's no limit. If you move a model through every one of their models, that's the limit. The limit is the number of enemy models in the crew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can. I mean, there were turns that I think one turn Jake got 3 summons out of this ability.
Yeah. And then
which is just crazy.
Combine it with the next thing to come up.
Yeah.
Right. The next ability is what makes it really powerful.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to make mention of with how AP efficient this summon is, and how difficult it is to deal with from an opponent's perspective. So one thing that I think gets often overlooked is 0-inch engages. So if you have a model with a 0-inch engage, it sucks. Stuff can dance around you, stuff can bounce out of combat with you, but once you actually get into combat, it is so hard for opponents to move their models around one of your models that has a 0-inch engage. Just having to stay in base contact while you try and move around to accomplish some other thing, it can be very, very disruptive to your opponent's plans, and Gaki have a 0-inch engage.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that, Jesse. One tip I will give you is just remember that a lot of those things are incorporeal. Right. So even though it's a 0-inch engage, you can go through it to be on the other side of it, as long as you're still touching it.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to the next ability, Revenge. Enemy models with adversary Urami within an 8-inch aura suffer a negative flip to willpower duels. Wow. And actions targeting this model, meaning Kirai. So once we get into Kirai's back of card, and you start to realize how rough that negative willpower flip is. Never mind the fact that it puts you at a negative to resist the summons from Join Us. She's got some pretty nasty willpower tech on the back of her card as well that you don't want to be at a negative flip against it. And
there's no shortage of adversary in a Urami pool anyway.
Yeah, and as we'll see on the back of her card, it's very easy for her to give adversary out. The other thing too is so that and actions targeting this model. One thing that you'll notice versus normal Asami Kirai is that she doesn't have protected, and she has no other defensive tech whatsoever. She doesn't have vengeance. She doesn't have serene countenance or manipulative or protected or anything like that. So being able to put any actions targeting this model at a negative once you get adversary on something, it's literally the only thing that she has to hide behind aside from her summons and other models.
Well, I mean, she has 13 wounds and she heals a bazillion.
She gained a wound.
Oh, she did gain a wound.
And she gained a point of defense as well. But you're right. She has lost all of her defensive tech, and revenge is defensive tech, but you have to plan ahead. So you have to hit that big beater with adversary before he gets to you.
Yeah, but the amount of healing that with Anchor to Reality, anytime anything damages anything, it's going to be healing her anyway.
Yeah, and when we get to the back of her card, she's got more healing. But yeah, she's got plenty of ways to heal. And one big takeaway I had was if you don't kill her by the end of a turn, she's going to be out of combat, too far away for you to attack, and fully healed before you get another chance to do it. You have to spike.
Yeah, definitely.
Or have shooting. Really good shooting. Yeah.
So moving on to the back of the card, her first ability is Sundering. It's a 12-inch range. It's not a projectile. Excuse me. 12-inch range. It's not a projectile. Stat 6, targeting willpower. Target suffers 1, 2, 3 damage. When resolving, the target suffers +1 damage for each Urami model engaging it, and there is no cap on that.
Yeah, that's interesting because most of the time these kind of things have a cap of 2 or 3.
Yeah. And because of the way that this crew works, it's very easy for you to get buried in cheap, otherwise not terribly useful models like Gaki and Seishin and what have you. I think that there were probably some points in our game that might have been a missed opportunity for you.
Yeah, we had talked about that afterwards. This Sundering is definitely something that I kind of overlooked. And looking back, I'm like, oh wow, I could have been doing min 5, with a willpower attack. So you're on negative flip. I'm on positive if you have adversary. It can be really, really good.
Yeah, and if there's one model, then you're min 2. Okay, great. That's not awesome. But as soon as there are 2 models, now you're min 3. A min 3 attack, with a marginal damage track, 3, 4, 5 still, when you're on a positive and I'm on a negative, like you just said, that's pretty brutal. And there's no friendly fire because it's not a projectile. It only has one trigger on it, which is My Loyal Servant, so you can, throw some healing around to models that are engaged, and then you can bounce that to where you need to because of her front of card. But even that ability, even having no triggers that directly affect damage or directly affect the enemy, has the potential to be just so powerful. I mean, if you have 3 models engaged with something, oh boy.
I love how I love how the trigger says, other than this model, even though she's within 8 inches, it can be this model, because she's just going to heal one of the other models, and then it heals her.
Yeah. And then her next ability is, it's a bonus action, actually. One of her 2. Thirst for Vengeance. 12-inch range, non-projectile. 7 stat on willpower. Enemy only. Target gains adversary. And then it has a mask, which, spoiler alert, you're probably going to go for this every single time. This model may take a bonus action.
And by mask, we really mean mask or crow.
Mask or
right,
crow.
Yeah, that's something definitely to keep in mind with all of these triggers.
Yeah, and it's a stat 7, so, and if you're targeting I mean, whatever you're targeting is not already going to be at a negative flip because you're trying to give it adversary in the first place, but just a stat 7 ability on a bonus action to give out adversary, which then enables the rest of your crew and then potentially let you take another bonus action.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's important that it's 7 because it is a clutch ability for summoning a Kirio.
Right. Which we're going to jump right
should
down to
probably
her
jump
other
down to
bonus
that.
action. So her other bonus action is a tactical. This one's only an 8-inch range, not a 12. Stat 6 needs a 14, so you're looking for an 8 of any suit. Target an enemy model with adversary Arami. Summon a Kirio with staggered into base contact with the target.
Hey, real quick. There's no defensive duel.
Right.
It's not opposed at all. It just happens.
You just need an 8. You just need an 8 and it happens.
You just need an 8, and the model has to have adversary. Now, to be fair, if you have any chance at resisting Thirst for Vengeance or other bonus action, you throw your highest card at that. Because if you can stop her from getting adversary on you, it's a bonus action, so she can only do it once a turn. And if you can deny that, it also will deny her ability to summon a Kirio on you. So that's why it's so important that the first one is a stat 7. But if you let that through, you are going to have a Kirio in your face.
Hey, real quick, you shouldn't be banking on that. Like I said before, there's about 5.2 million ways to get adversary out in your army crew, and that should your thirst for vengeance free action should be like a failsafe.
Right. I mean, that's the one where if you don't have any models with adversary up, because Kirai is activating early in the turn, because adversary clears at the end of the turn, she doesn't have a way with this version of Kirai to keep it going from turn to turn. So if she activates early, which, she might, she's master.
I don't think she needs to, though. And I think it's actually better she doesn't, because the more models that move through things generates more models that are base contact with things. So when she starts, and she can just start sundering things to death.
And the other thing is, when she activates, you want to summon a Kirio. So you want a Kirio to be dead. So you probably, just like with the old version of Kirai, you want a Kirio to run in, attack, get killed, get summoned back, and attack again. So you want Kirai to go late in the game or late in the round so that you can get that double use on it.
Right, and it's even worse with this one because with the previous Kirai, at least a Kirio would have to be summoned within 6 inches of the original Kirai, and then you'd have to use movement tricks to move her up, move a Kirio up the field. In this one, she's getting summoned right next to you, so she's going to get all of her AP to smash you to pieces.
Still within 8 inches, though.
Still within 8 inches.
But luckily enough, that 8 inches also puts her in Ghostly Presence range. It puts her in Anchor to Reality range.
And this 8-inch range is on a bonus action, so you can fire that off at whatever point in her activation is the most beneficial for you. And as we're going to see with her tacticals, she's got a lot of movement tricks.
She's going to be where she needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, the way that I put it is she's like the Zip of Rezzers. She is going to do what she wants to do, and if you don't have a way to deal with her, you are not going to be able to deal with her. So next up, we've got her tacticals. We've got Into the Mist, which is an 8-inch range, only a stat 5, needs a 10. So you're looking for a 5. Friendly Arami only. Target heals 2. Until end phase, enemy models treat the area within 3 inches of the target as concealing. So you used this a number of times in our game. What do you think of this ability, Jake?
I think that concealing is really underrated because it affects more than just shooting. And I think a lot of people forget about that. Something like Thirst for Vengeance. So I think putting up concealing auras to give yourself a little bit of defense is really big. Unfortunately, any shooting army worth its salt is going to just ignore concealing. So a lot of times that's not going to be useful. As a heal, I think it's pretty good. I would take heal 2 over heal 1, 2, 3 any day.
Yeah, and it's, not that you necessarily want to be using a Master AP just for the Concealment Aura, but in some circumstances that still makes sense. it isn't dependent on your model actually getting healed to give out the concealment. So if you just want that aura up, you can certainly do that.
Right, and because of her front of card ability, if you can put the aura where it is most advantageous and put the heal where it is actually useful, you know?
Right. And that's something. There's something to be said for that, because Jake and I actually started to play another game which we ran out of time on, which was a Zoraida versus Kirai Envoy. And the concealment aura was really frustrating for Zoraida because she does not like to have to deal with concealment when she's trying to do her obeys. So to your point, like, there's plenty of stuff that aren't regular old shooting attacks that your opponent might have ways around, that concealment really hampers.
It's a tactical, so she can target herself as well.
Yep, sure can.
Just to give her that extra little layer of defense if there isn't
Yep.
any kind of sniper shooting or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. It's probably worth popping it up turn 1, turn 2. After that, you're probably not.
Yeah.
It's situational.
Yeah, you're probably not using a Master AP just for a 2-point heal and a concealment aura that's not going to do a whole lot because you're already in the mix. But who knows?
Yeah.
It's a nice option.
And the thing with the heal, too, is if you need to heal stuff, I mean, you still have the My Loyal Servant trigger off the Sundering, which is going to heal models anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So next up, and this is another really, really key ability for her, and it's the last one on her card that we haven't discussed yet, and that's Swirling Spirits. So it's an 8-inch pulse, stat 6, target number X. So target any number of other friendly Yarami models. She can't target herself. The TN of this action is equal to the total cost of all targets. Push each target up to 5 inches in any direction, ignoring models and terrain, ending the push within range. It's got 2 triggers. Behind you, one target may take in melee action, and on a mask, walk the other world. Push this model up to 5 inches in any direction, ignoring models and terrain. So
ending the push within range,
right,
which is a big deal.
Yeah, that is important. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that this ability is amazing.
Yeah.
It's so
to say
good.
The least.
It is so. It is the ultimate efficiency of AP, because you're moving. You're taking probably 3 or 4 actions off of this 1 AP, and because of the variable target number, you can always make this go off. Like, this is never going to fail if you play the game right. I don't know. How long do you have? Because we can go on about this ability for a long time.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think that in Malifaux, movement is the most important thing. Being in the right position is key, and this ability, being able to move multiple models, ignoring terrain and other models, is so huge. It just allows you to position and reposition so effectively.
Yeah, and there are a few Arami models that are not incorporeal. That's worth mentioning. Kirai being one of them. So the trigger allows her to, to push up to 5 inches, ignoring models and terrain. So essentially, she can gain incorporeal for the duration of that move. Lost Love is not incorporeal, and is that it? Is Datsuba? I can't remember.
The Shikomi are not incorporeal,
yep.
And that's it. Yeah, I think.
So yeah, I mean, essentially, it allows models that otherwise would not be able to ignore models and terrain to do so.
The drowned are.
The drowned. Right.
Yeah, which is big. It's really big for her because that's something that I have often had trouble with, is that her crew can get where they need to be, even if there's blocking terrain or something in the way, but she ends up being stuck slogging through a forest or something like that.
Yeah, for that first turn, I mean, and that's the other thing. This is not a once per turn ability. I mean, you can, and there were a couple of times when Jake Swirling Spirits multiple times a turn and was hitting either attacks with behind you or walk the other world with Kirai to get her in more advantageous position.
If you have any low card in your hand, like a 1 of crows, then you can walk. No, seriously, if you have a 1 of crows, you can walk the other world, and you can push Kirai, and you can push another model, or 3 Station or Lost Love, or something like that. You can use this as a walk for her, and a push for multiple other models.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's actually a very good point. Is half the cards in your deck are going to get you the Walk the Other World trigger. Now you might not want to use a super high card on it, depending on the circumstance, but yeah, it's literally a guaranteed ability. Like you could you if you just targeted a Station or a Gaki or something like that, you would even succeed on a Black Joker on
Yep.
this. Even
Yeah,
if
you wouldn't
wouldn't
get the trigger, but yeah, you will never fail this action if you do it right. And I think that is the argument right there for why you take the Whisper on Kirai. I think that is almost an auto include with this version of Kirai. For those that don't know, Whisper gives you intuition, which lets you look at the top 3 cards of your Fate deck when she starts her turn and rearrange them in any order. So by doing that, I mean, if you Swirling Spirits multiple times, you already know exactly how many models you can name and what suits you're going to hit. And a Ram or a Crow is going to let you hit behind you to get a free attack, which is amazing if Akirio is there. And a Mask or a Crow is going to let you move Kirai. So, I mean, there's so much you can do with this one action.
There's no limit to the number of times you can use this on something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the 2 of Rams or the 2 of Crows, well, let's say you have both, you can, and you have another card that'll trigger behind you, you could realistically push and attack with Ikiro 3 times. That's not including Ikaro's attacks already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's using trash cards that you want to get rid of, and it's not even stoning. Yeah, it's
that's really cool.
It's pretty incredible. I think that's one that when you look at it on the surface, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. But when you actually see it in practice, it's a different story.
It's just so efficient, like Jake's talking about. It's AP efficient, right? Because you're able to perform multiple actions with just 1 AP, and not just for one model, for several models. But also, it's versatile in its usage because you can use it offensively to make a ton of attacks, or you can use it for the movement game and claiming objectives, whatever it is with walk in the other world. Walk the other world.
Hey, and what else is it doing? It's triggering Join-Us off the front of the card.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
It's so efficient.
Insane. There was at one point, I think that I spent 1 AP and I moved 3 models, made an attack with Akirio, and summoned 2 models. With a single AP.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Pretty bananas.
I mean, it's limited by its 8-inch aura. So, I mean, how far can you push them? I guess depends on how far you have Kirai, which at some point is going to put her in harm's way.
Yeah.
Right, because if you want to sort of rush with this crew, you need to hit the Walk the Other World trigger first, so that she's in range for the second time.
Correct.
But
yeah, because she's going to have to move with them.
That is the big disadvantage of Kirai, is that she does need to be close to the combat, and as we discussed, she doesn't really have any defensive tech. But
yeah, that's something that we talked about in the Asami Takusen episode too, is that literally all of that master's abilities are an 8-inch range. Period. Yeah, and all her auras, all her abilities, everything. There's a lot of similarity with Kirai here, where she does have a couple of 12-inch range abilities, but to be fully effective, she still has to be within that 8 inches.
Which makes her, in essence, kind of a bubble crew.
Right. She is definitely a bubble crew. Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully for her, she's a bubble crew that doesn't have to worry about not being able to move through her own models or enemy models or terrain.
Yeah. But also doesn't want to be blasted on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but she's also a bubble crew that has really good tar pitting. We kind of discussed that with the Join Us ability, is that these models that you're summoning, they're not great, but they're engaging people. So they're creating these little tar pits where your opponent might have an amazing enforcer beater, but he's got two Sation and a Gaki engaging him, and he just can't disengage. Like he's got to sit there and kill all three of them.
And the other thing to consider with that, just playing into the base Urami, play style is you're creating all these little dinky models, and it's not just that they're engaging you, and it's not just that you have to kill them. It's that every time you hit them, you're taking vengeance damage. So you have all these stupid models that, while they might not be doing a whole lot to your opponent, it's not only costing them AP and resources, but it's costing them health to be able to deal with these things.
I think if you're playing into this, you really need to make sure you pass those willpower duels for Join Us. I think that more than almost anything else, I know you might want to be holding on to the cards because you want to do this, you want to do that. But I mean, ultimately, just looking at Kirai herself, her stats aren't fantastic. Right, just baseline, her stats aren't super fantastic, and the amount of AP that you're going to have to put into dealing with the tar pits, and then the damage you're going to take from the tar pits, and then how much better it makes her as far as with Sundering and everything like that. I almost think that you have to nip it in the bud early enough where you have to pass those willpower duels. So if you have to chuck a 13 at it, you might have to do it. And then you're going to have to top deck everything else because the stats on everything else aren't fantastic. So you really have to weigh how important that is.
That's definitely worth considering.
Definitely brings up something that I was kind of thinking about with this version of Kirai, is that she is putting a lot of pressure on your opponent's hand, because you're right. If you get that low card on a willpower flip, you have to cheat it. Hopefully you don't have adversary on you and you can cheat it, but you're using those high cards to cheat those, and you're also using cards to cheat terrifying checks. I mean, we haven't talked about crew yet, but if you have a couple models with terrifying in your crew, that front of card ability Revenge is going to give them negative flips on willpower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It disables your opponent's crew. It requires a lot of resources to stay in the game and stop themselves from getting buried, and also demands resources to pass those terrifying checks and all that, just exactly what you were saying. And as soon as you have like one or two free summons, and one of those summons gets freed up because their model that they're engaging dies or walks away or something, like it doesn't cost you that much just to charge through something with a Gaki that you suddenly find free and think, oh, there's another Join Us test. And it can just snowball. It can snowball so quickly.
And then, I mean, conversely, the other version of Kirai, she puts pressure on her own hand because, like most summoners, she's got pretty high target numbers she needs to hit for her summons. And granted, she's summoning things that are really good, but you're using the highest card in your hand. And if you want to summon a Kirio and like a Goryo or something like that, then you probably have a trash hand once you're done with those summons. As opposed to this version of Kirai, which doesn't really need anything specific out of her hand.
I will say this though, is that version 1 Kirai, very much a true summoner. You can't do anything to stop those summons. They're just going to happen. So as playing version 1 Kirai, you can plan those summons into your game plan. This Kirai, I don't think you can bank on it because a candy opponent is going to do everything possible to prevent you from something.
True. That's a good point. And to that point, Jesse and I have talked about this during our game. I think that this version of Kirai's Join Us ability can be a real trap. I think people can read that ability and then they can dedicate way too much AP to trying to make it happen. Like if you're spending an AP to walk and then push someone and make sure they have adversary on them just so you can summon a Gaki, then you're wasting your AP. Like it can definitely be a trap people to fall into where they're like, oh, I can get a summon if I do all these different things. Like it has to be completely incidental. You have to just look at opportunities where you're going to be doing a different thing, but also getting this option.
No, I agree, and I think that's what I was alluding to before when I was talking about how it's more of like an environmental hazard. Is you shouldn't you shouldn't go into the game plan banking on it, but know it exists. Take the opportunities to do it to make it more frustrating for your opponent, but have a game plan that doesn't involve joins.
So that said, that's everything on her card, and we spent quite a bit of time on that. So let's get into the game. So for the cruise, Jake, do you have there what you brought to the game?
Yeah, I brought Kirai. I put Whisper on her, as we just discussed. I thought having the ability to see those cards would be super useful. Ikirio, obviously, is automatically there. I took Datsuba. She is, I think, just really good, and she also has more ways to pass out adversary. 2 Goryo with Grave Spirit's Touch. This one might be a little more controversial, but so normally with a Kirai crew, you would probably never pay for a Goryo because you would be summoning them in. But not having that option anymore, you got to pay for them if you want them. They do have a 0 action that can pass out adversary. It's only a stat 5, but it's another way to get adversary. And they have a demise ability that gives out adversary. So they're giving you adversary. You're gonna get it. It's gonna happen no matter what, like Adam said. And then as far as the upgrade, my rationale there was the whole terrifying thing. So we talked about putting pressure on your opponent's hand, forcing them to use those high cards to stop you from giving them adversary or summoning. And if they do get adversary and they're taking a negative to those willpower duels for terrifying check, suddenly they can be really neutered when they're attacking your team. And with Datsuba and Ikirio already having terrifying, now I've got 4 models on the table with terrifying, which is that's the point at which it really starts to impact your opponent's hand. And regenerate, of course, always a good option, so giving that to them is handy. And if they're not at full wounds, they can choose to give that heal to a different model instead. Don't think it ever came up, but it's nice to have as an option. After that, I had the Lost Love. He's kind of just an auto include. He's just a all-around toolboxy kind of model. I took 1 Sation. In retrospect, with how much movement Kirai brings to the game, I don't think I would pay for a Sation to start. They don't really. I didn't really need the extra movement because I think, in my opinion, that's what you take Sation for, is to use Guide Spirit to move your models around. But because Kirai can do that so well, you don't need to bring that Sation, and you're going to summon a bunch of them anyway. And then the last thing I took, which was really just an anti-tech pick, was a Nurse. Obviously, this isn't something that would be in most Kirai lists, but because Jesse played Brewmaster, the Nurse was a good anti-Jesse pick.
Hey, can I say something real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Jake, did you consider taking any other masters?
I thought about it, but honestly, the reason I didn't was, one of the reasons I didn't was because we were doing a test game, and I wanted to really just see how Kirai did, and I thought that would be kind of a weird test if I threw in like Jackdaw or something like that. Jackdaw being the one I was thinking of.
Jackdaw would be insane with
yes,
her.
you would. You would.
And so I was just talking. I was looking them up while you were talking. Like, man, I wonder what other. Oh my god, insane!
And yep. And Jakuna is a shared keyword for the 2 of them.
Correct.
So, yeah, that would be I would like to try that at some point.
Oh my god, his terrifying bubble.
Yeah.
And then, like, he gives everybody the -1 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
And he's got a bunch of willpower attacks. He's got a willpower pulse attack.
Yeah. He's handed out staggered. He's handed out staggered. So even if you wanted to get away from her summons, you can't because you're not moving anywhere.
Right. And he's a master that can play relatively super solo. Like, he doesn't necessarily need the support of his keyword models to do his job.
Correct. Like, there is nothing that matters if he's the master or not. You know how, like, a lot of the masters they have, if they're a leader of this crew, they get this. He doesn't got that. And then he's still doing his upgrade shenanigans. because that's just built into his attacks.
Yeah.
It's silly.
And he's not a model that you can just ignore. Like, if he's in your shit and you don't deal with him,
yeah,
it's going to be a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just attach this card to hers.
You're not going to make any friends playing
boy.
the two of them.
Yeah, that would be that would be a good way to end a gaming group. Drive off new players. It's good stuff.
So, looking back at the game, I probably wouldn't have taken the nurse, knowing what I know now, just because I didn't really need the condition removal. Lost Love and the Sation already offer enough of that. And I never really got to use her other trick, which is if you put a bunch of poison on my model, I can obey my model and get extra attacks and stuff like that. Just wasn't really necessary. So I thought it was clever, and you did too. You were like, "Oh, you're a jerk," but I probably would just stick with Jakuna. She's always good.
All right, so in terms of my crew, I took Brewmaster with 12 cups of coffee, Apprentice Wesley, of course, Whiskey Golem, Popcorn Turner, which was my kind of little bit of a flex pick. I don't usually take him, but he's quick enough that I felt like he was going to be good in this particular pool. Trixie Belle, a Moon Shinobi, an Akaname, and a Lucky Effigy with the Effigy of Fate upgrade. I had a 6-stone cache. We'll get to how the game actually played out in a sec, but it just occurred to me that we skipped right over what the game was. So let me let all you all know what we were playing. We had a wedge deployment game in Symbols of Authority, Claim Jump, Deathbeds, Assassinate, Breakthrough, and Detonate the Charges. That was the scheme pool. So just jumping right to how the game turned out for final scores. Jake ended up on top. He took the game with 4 points to my 2. Definitely a low-scoring game. Jake took 2 points on the strategy, 2 points on breakthrough, and no points on claim jump. I took a total of 2 points. I got 2 strat points. I did not manage to get any points for either assassinate or for breakthrough. So in the pregame discussion, obviously we knew what Jake was going to be playing. But what were your kind of first impressions with Kirai, and did you feel like this was a good pool for her? Would you take her into a similar pool again?
So we kind of cheated with the pool. We basically said, like, let's pick something that I think I would play Kirai into. So I picked Symbols of Authority and then randomly generated all of the schemes. But I would definitely play her into Symbols because she has all of these ways to push her team. Her team has a lot of ways to move that aren't places. Which, usually a lot of those movement tricks are leaps or teleports and stuff like that, so you can't really use them in Symbols. But Kirai gets around all that because she's just pushing. She's pushing her guys out of combat, through combat. She doesn't care. So I would definitely pick her into this. The only one I would probably wouldn't take this version of Kirai into Turf War. Because she's making all these minions that are pretty easy to kill, and they're just going to allow your opponent to flip markers.
Yeah, that's a good point, for sure. So do you think that you would take her... So you think you would take her into everything but Turf War?
I don't know. Ley lines, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
She's got lots of movement, and I'm sorry, we played Symbols. I'm confusing this with our other game.
Oh yeah, we played Symbols, but you would take her into ley lines because you don't rely on places by and large. It's mostly pushes.
My bad. So that's what I meant before. But I would take her into Symbols or ley lines because she has great movement and because she has a great tar pit, so she can stop your guys from getting where they need to be.
What about break the line? So you wouldn't be able to use your summons to affect the strategy markers at that point.
Yes, so break the line's a maybe because she does have great movement, but she doesn't really have any interaction tricks, and her summons, can't really do it. So it's a maybe, probably not. There's better options.
Yeah, you'd have to be using the AP on your more valuable models. And the way that you built this particular crew, anyway, you had it was relatively elite. I mean, you had a lot of high cost models. You don't necessarily want to be using like a Goryo with Grave Spirit's touch to go kick a can for the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one place where Kirai, both versions of Kirai suffer is they don't have a lot of tricks when it comes to dropping scheme markers or removing scheme markers. I mean, the Lost Love can remove scheme markers a little bit, but other than that, there's not a lot of ways to drop them in combat. Like there's so many other masters that are so much better at that have things like move a guy and drop a marker, or turn a corpse marker into a scheme marker. And Arami has none of that. So they suffer when they go into things like where you need to drop markers in close proximity to the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. And as far as me, like I picked Brewmaster for a couple of reasons. Quite frankly, one of them is just because I haven't played Brewmaster in a long time, and this is a decent pool for him. He has enough quick models that he can do symbols. He's generally pretty good at claim jump. He's usually pretty resistant to getting killed, so he's a good pick for assassinate, and he can typically murk enemy masters without too much difficulty. Breakthrough and wedge is certainly always an option just because the deployment zone is so large. He doesn't really have a great way to get out detonate charges unless he uses some extra AP and an Akaname, but I probably wasn't going for that anyway. And honestly, I just really like Brewmaster. I don't necessarily think that he's one of the best Bayou masters, but he's a hell of a lot of fun to play. And I didn't remember that there was as much condition removal in the keyword, in the Arami keyword. Otherwise, I probably would have picked somebody else. But I mean, it still ended up being pretty good. The score played out the way that it did, mostly for reasons not related to a lot of counterattack, or it was mostly just bad decision making on my part, or just the way that the cards flipped. So yeah, I feel like he was a fine choice, and in another version of the same game, he probably would have done just fine.
I can see her being absolutely incredible for ley lines.
Yeah,
just incredible for it. I mean, she not only is it push is her movement push movement, but it's incorporeal push movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're not going to stop it, and she can just take the entire bubble from ley line marker to ley line marker.
And and also all those ley line markers, she can push right through them to be on the other side.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, just push everything with you the entire way.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I was confusing ley lines and symbols before because the game that we had started, that we weren't able to finish, we did ley lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm curious, Adam, Monday morning quarterbacking this, if you had been playing Kirai, what would you have taken for schemes? I feel like you're really good at picking.
If I was playing her as her,
I feel like you always pick the right schemes.
I don't know. I mean, claim jump is pretty good, but you have to. I like claim jump when you can move the enemy, and you don't have to really have anything to move the enemy. You move a lot of yourself. With what you have, and it being symbols, I might have gone breakthrough just because I'd probably want to bring, like we were just talking about with ley lines. I mean, you're going to essentially do the same thing with symbols, right? You're going to bring the crew and pick up a symbol, and bring the crew and pick up a symbol, and you can drop your markers as you go along and do that. Especially since you can use that her AP to move multiple models to set them up to drop the markers. And I don't know, I'd probably take Assassinate, knowing what Sundering does. You just pick a model, throw a bunch of models into it, and just hit them for like 4 or 5.
I think you're right. I think looking back at the game, I didn't have. What happened was I lost the Goryo, who was the claim jump target, very early, but I didn't have a way to move you away from the center. And I kind of forgot how amazing Akirio was. I think it's. I don't know if you ever don't take Assassinate with Kirai.
Yeah. I mean, but you also have to know that if you have Assassinate, that you're probably going to have Assassinate taken on you.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to have to take her out anyway, and she's lost all that protected, and she's lost vengeance. At this point, if you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, make it a basket that's going to score you points.
Sort of, sorry, a little off topic, but we were talking about the list before, and one other thing that I had kind of thought about afterwards that might be a cool pick for her if you're looking out of keyword. She doesn't really mesh well with much of the versatile, but because she lost that protected status, looking for other ways to kind of protect her, I was thinking, what in Rezzers has Take the Hit, which is essentially protected in reverse. And the two options are the Shield Bearer and the Ashigari. It's a little expensive, but if you get stuck with this version of Kirai up against a beater crew, I think you might consider taking one of those.
Yeah, I mean, Ashigaru, even, what are they, 5 stones?
They're 5,
So
yeah.
6 out of keyword, and then how many points are shield bearers?
They're 6, so they'd be 7.
6, so 7.
They've got a lot more synergy, but 7 stones is a lot.
Yeah, definitely worth considering. And yeah, I think shield bearers would probably be a good pick. So yeah, I mean, kind of getting into the highlights of the game. You guys already know how it turned out. It was a pretty wild game. Turn 1 was really rough for the Kirai crew. Actually managed to kill both of the Goryo turn 1. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of them you played a little bit cagey with one of them, and it turned out that was your claim jump target. And then I think what ended up happening, Trixie lured you in, and then Brewmaster lured you again, and then killed him.
Yeah.
And then the other Goryo charged into the middle, and then at the end of the turn, the Whiskey Golem ended up being able to get a charge lane thanks to Nimble, and then punched him 3 times and killed him too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I killed a couple of your models as well.
You killed the Akaname turn 1.
The Akaname. Something else?
Nope, not turn 1. It was just the Akaname.
Did I summon a couple models? I must have summoned.
Oh, no, you know what? I think you killed the effigy. Was that turn 1 or was that turn 2?
That might have been turn 1.
I think it was turn 1. Yeah, it was Akirio, I think, took out the effigy turn 1.
Yep.
So I tried speed bumping Akirio with the Akaname, just because it has a 2-inch engage and it automatically gives out slow on its attack. And Jake managed to dispatch it a little more quickly than I expected him to. So my speed bump didn't really work out. All I ended up doing was throwing away a 4-point model, which was just fantastic. And then he ended up being able to kill my effigy very, very quickly. I honestly can't remember if it was turn 1 or early turn 2, but suffice it to say it happened before I could get really any use out of it at all.
I just remember the end of turn 1 saying, wow, I'm down 20 stones. You're down like 8. But I said, but at least I got a summon off.
Yeah.
It was a very active turn 1.
Yeah, I believe you summoned Dagaki turn 1. So at that point, I mean, I was feeling pretty good about the game. Like Jake said, he was down 20 points and both of his big hitters were taken care of. And then the Akirio resummoning engine came online, and I realized how much more potent and like Akirio resummoning in vanilla Kirai is one thing, but Akirio resummoning with this Kirai is just fucking brutal. It's so brutal because she can get it off so easily. And like I said before, Akirio comes in right in the thick of it, ready to just tear people's faces off. It's rough.
I did want to point out one thing. The summon ability for Akirio does give her staggered, which is important because it means that you can't use Swirling Spirits to move Akirio. But I could be wrong, Jesse. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't mean that Akirio can't still be the target of Swirling Spirits. She just can't move.
Right. So you can target her. You can't move her, but you can still get the trigger for the extra attacks.
Exactly.
Right. So we already talked about summoning without using extra AP being really good. Just reiterating that point, it just adds to the whole snowball effect. And that is really what kind of turned this game into almost like a seesaw, where it seemed like it was really going my way turn 1, and then turn 2 it started going back the other direction, and then by the beginning of turn 3, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to win this game. Yeah. What was your thought process as the game progressed, Jake?
Well, early on, I was definitely worried after losing the 2 Goryo, but I also felt good about just the positioning, because going into turn 2, I had Kirai in a position where I could push all of my stuff up and really start that snowball chain reaction of going through your willpower 4 models and getting all of these summons off, and I was just in a good place with the bubble, and there was a little bit of terrain, and I was able to kind of dodge back and forth like through it with Kirai because of that trigger. So I felt pretty confident at that point. I was a little worried about Popcorn Turner being way out on my flank because he is super fast. And I was like, oh, he's going to run back there and he's going to score the strategy, and then he's going to start scoring, breakthrough or something like that. But luckily that didn't happen. I sent Datsuba over there, and they kind of just danced around each other a little bit. I think he was responsible for both points that you scored.
Yeah, he's the only thing that scored any points for him. He got 2 strategy points, and he tried to get a breakthrough point the last turn, but even with like 6 pass tokens, I still wasn't able to push his activation off far enough that he was able to get that last point. So
yeah, going back to Adam's point about kind of stacking your crew with willpower. When we started the game, I thought I'm in a really good spot because you've got like 3 models with a 4 willpower, which means that I'm going to charge through them, attack something that I actually care about attacking, and force them to take a willpower check that they need a 9 on, or I'm going to get a free model. And that happens so many times where I would charge through them and then attack, someone else. And that's really how you take advantage of that,
Yeah, for sure. And the only thing that you have to remember with the join us ability is that it does happen after the action resolves. So, like for a charge, for instance, you can charge through something, and the charge action resolves before you take the attack. So even if you're going to kill the model that you're attacking, they still have to take the join us test before the actual attack happens. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that you can charge, and then even if you're going to kill the model, you get to do the summon with join us is nasty.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a lot of times with this crew where you want to leave certain models alive because they're sort of an easy summoning battery, especially if your Akirio has died and you want to get it back into play. You might not want to kill something that has a 4 willpower because Kirai is going to easily be able to put adversary on that model and then summon Akirio.
Yeah. The only other thing I was going to make mention of with the game was that and this is something that I said after the game wrapped, I don't think I've seen a game that there have been more Jokers come up in. It was ridiculous. I think at one point the same Gaki hit red Joker damage 2 turns in a row and killed 2 models. There was one point, I think on turn 3, when Jake tried to resummon Akirio and then Black Jokered the summon, and if that Akirio summon had gone off, the game would have gone off the rails for me way faster than it did. It was pretty wild. We saw a lot of red Joker damage. I think, if I recall correctly, that's how the Whiskey Golem ended up killing the second Goryo turn 1, was with a red Joker damage.
And then I think I killed the Whiskey Golem with a red Joker.
Yep, red
Gaki.
Joker damage with the Gaki. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So looking back on when we were talking earlier about what schemes I would have taken, I mean, you're fairly set in that if you had to make the crew over again, you would have dropped the nurse in the station and taken Jakuna.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you had taken Jakuna and used Jakuna as your claim jump, I think that's a really solid move. Because I'm looking at her while we're talking, and I think she's almost the perfect Swirling Spirits target. Simply because of the size of her base, makes it easier to move through a bunch of models in one go. I I don't know how would that work if she puts up her hazardous terrain aura and then you move her into the enemy.
It doesn't actually take effect. The hazardous doesn't ping until the enemy takes an action in that aura. Like
Okay.
moving a hazardous marker through enemy models doesn't.
But you can
hazardous.
jam her real quick.
Yeah.
So you just if you don't need her for something, you just chuck 8 points worth of tar pit into a bulk of their crew, and then you just do whatever you want.
I mean, she can take her turn to like walk up and interact with something, just doing nothing in the backfield,
or just lure,
and then triggering her, or just lure. Yeah, she could just walk up and lure something forward, walk up and lure one of your opponent's models forward, put up her hazardous aura, and then on Kirai's turn, she's Swirling Spirits or twice into the middle of your opponent's crew.
Yeah, and then you're stuck with a model that has a 1-inch engagement, so you're not really moving anywhere. But she's got the 3-inch hazardous terrain aura. She's got Vengeance 1, Serene Countenance, Incorporeal. Yep. You have to deal with her
on what 50 mil base, right?
On a 50.
50. Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, so you're probably moving her through at least 3 models anyway.
She's really good, and she brings something to the Arame crew that they kind of are lacking. She's got a lot of those kind of toolbox help you score point abilities, where the rest of the crew is mostly just adversary and attack.
Yeah. Side note, I kind of wonder why I don't see Jakuna out of keyword that often, because I feel like she's
I don't know. I take her with Jack literally every time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not out of
keyword, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of the way that the game played out. It was, I don't want to get too deep into the highlights because we're already like, an hour and 20 into it. And we've talked about the bulk of the models at this point. But I guess, Jake, do you have any kind of post-game thoughts aside from like the changes to the crew build or anything else that you haven't shared yet?
I think we've pretty thoroughly covered all of it. I mean, the big takeaway that I had from this version of Kirai right after our game was she's extremely powerful, but she is really easy to kill. If you have a dedicated combat crew, a shooting crew, or a really good smash your face crew, she can go down pretty quickly. And I think that's cool. She's not uber powerful. She has her downside, but she has the tricks, the movement tricks, and summons and engagement tricks to offset that. But it's not automatic. It requires a little bit of thought and planning.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to say in terms of just dealing with Kirai, Envoy, is if you can cut the head off the snake, it's not like her crew is bad without her, but they lose so much without her in play. I feel like that's really the way that you have to play it. I feel like trying to ignore Kirai and playing your game and just hoping that you're going to pass your join us duels and what have you is a losing game. You have to go for the throat, I think, when you're playing against her.
Definitely. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about during our game is so much of Malifaux is knowing what your opponent is capable of doing and how you're going to stop it, right? Like, this is how you're going to score at this point. You're going to move this guy. You're going to obey this guy over there. You're going to, do this trick to teleport this dude so that you can score a point. And you need to spot what your opponent is going to do and then deploy the appropriate counters. But the problem with this version of Kirai is that her options are so limitless, mainly because of Swirling Spirits. It's so hard to know how to counter all of what she is possibly going to do when it comes her turn to activate.
Yeah, definitely. So that said, with all that flexibility and all the movement tricks, and I know how much you love that stuff, with Kirai in the faction, when do you think you take her over other masters? Like, what do you feel like her place in the faction is? Does she fill a niche that they were missing? Does she replace an existing master where you feel like she just does what that master does but better?
I think this might sound controversial. I think she's better than original Kirai.
That is definitely saying something, because Kirai, I mean, vanilla Kirai is generally regarded as being top tier.
Yeah. I originally didn't feel that way, but the more I think about the way she summons a Curio, the way she moves her crew, I think she might be better. It's of course it's not always the case. There's going to be situations where you need to play the other Kirai, or else you're just going to get blown off the table by some crazy Ophelia shooting list or something like that. But I think she is a solid pick into most games. Does she do anything better than other masters? Trying to really quickly think about the rest of the Rezzers. I don't think anyone has the mobility she has, and it's a lot of that is because of the incorporeal and the triggers that allow her to act as if she was incorporeal. I mean, I think if you are in a tournament and you show up to a table with a ton of terrain on it, she is someone you should immediately consider playing.
I think too that original Kirai lost a little bit of steam with the overall nerf to summoning in general.
Absolutely.
Which makes you tend to lean more into this one, because the summoning is while incidental, is also useful, but it's not necessary in the game plan. And she offers, I think, a little more as far as versatility. So
yeah, and there were actually, it's kind of funny you should mention that, because in this game there were, I think, 3 instances that I can remember where Jake had to summon Gaki and went to go interact with a strategy marker and then couldn't because it was now he always had something else to interact with it instead, just because at that point he had like 9 friggin' models on the table and I had 2 or 3. But it was just interesting that came up as many times as it did.
Yeah, and if you were playing original Kirai, I mean, you would have had to summon in things, and you'd have to take your scorers and summon in beaters, and I don't know. It's a whole new world with her. She's still very strong, but I mean, this one seems to have not exactly a ton of weaknesses.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really interested to see what the Guisin are going to bring to the party, because I mean, like we saw with Lady Yume, with Nightmare and Oni, and now we've seen with Kenshiro, these support models that are coming out. Oh, we saw it with the Drudges as well. These support models, especially with the Drudges, really define the way that these masters can play and bring an amount of support to the table that can actually change the way that they play. The Drudges really define both of those masters, and just from using Lady Yume, the amount of support that she brought was irreplaceable with any other models in faction. So we'll see. I mean, it could be that she gets an even bigger buff once we see what the rules for these new models are. So,
if that is a minion with some sort of way to help her with dropping markers, then that's going to make her a top tier option.
yeah. Imagine if it turns out to be like a defensive minion that you can use to help screen her. Oh man.
Yeah. Yep. That would, any of those things. I mean, really, like anything. If it's like you said, it's probably something designed to work with her, and that's great. I mean, and if it's a 4-point or less minion, then that's scary.
So much the better. Imagine if it ends up being like an 8-point minion. You're like, oh, that's.
Well, they seem to be doing. They seem to be doing big enforcers who are dual keywords. So maybe it's. Maybe it's, I don't know, some sort of Neverborn dual keyword thing.
Imagine if all three of them go on the same base, and it's actually like a swarm of these models on like a 50. That'd be pretty cool.
I'll take it.
Yeah,
That would be
real.
great. Like Adam was saying, like, big things like that just go through enemy bases easier.
Mm-hmm.
Cause more checks.
Cool. So, any other closing thoughts, Adam?
No, I think we've beaten this to death.
Cool. Yeah, I think she's great. I do have a little bit of experience against Vanilla Kirai, and I think I would rather deal with that than deal with this. Yeah, this version of Kirai is a lot.
It's a lot, but it's a lot, but it's not broken. It's very powerful, but it's not broken.
Yeah,
it's not broken. The counter is very obvious. Kill Kirai.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
she's not complicated.
She's at least as of what we know now. I mean, she suffers from accurate shooting that ignores concealment. Mm-hmm. Anything that can really reach out and touch her is going to be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because against original Kirai, a game that Jake and I had a while ago was Zip versus Vanilla Kirai, and Zip is really, really, really bad in that matchup. Her crew gets around most of the stuff that he brings to the table. Zip might actually be pretty good against this Kirai because he can pick her up and move her out of her bubble, move her away from her support models, and put her in position for my beaters like Mancha and Johan to smash her face when she doesn't have anything to protect her.
Yeah, I think that new Vix is pretty good against this Kirai as well because she doesn't care about engagement. She's gonna just charge out of engagement and whack Kirai.
Yeah,
so
or she just
keep her away.
Or she's just
and charge through the incorporeal models as you mentioned, so you can't even body block her.
Or she's just going to move one of your models onto the other side of Kirai and then do 3 damage to Kirai just because. And then charge her and all kinds of craziness. Yeah, she's really good. I can't
Anytime you've got beaters like her who can get themselves out of bad engagements, because it sucks to have a 10-point beat stick who has to waste their AP killing a 3-point minion that was summoned. Yeah,
absolutely. Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much all we got. I didn't have anything else to add. Last chance for you guys. No,
I got nothing.
Cool.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely have to do it again. Like you said, if they tease a new Molly, you're my man.
All right.
Cool. So as always, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Keep an eye on your feed for more new master teases, and I will tell everybody that we have joined in the weird collaboration. We do not have our master or model teases just yet, but we are going to be releasing over the Labor Day weekend. So that's when you can look to see some new content from us with an exclusive tease on the Boring Conversation podcast feed. And with that, stay weird, folks. All right, cool. We're going to do a 5-second count of silence, and then we're going to start talking. Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse.
Oh, Jake. Yeah, sorry. Let's start that over. Jake, do you do the second one because I have to do something?
I forgot I didn't specify.
Yeah. You do the second one because I have to do something stupid at the end, like usual.
Yes, like usual.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll do. Yeah, I'm Jesse. You'll do. I'm Jake or Jacob or whatever you want to be referred to by, and then Adam will come up with some stupid shit. Cool. All right. So 5 seconds. So, kind of our typical. Jesus, little fucking footnote there.